Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. On behalf of our flight crew, I'd like to welcome you aboard our flight today.
Hey, how's everybody? Good. Well, we're starting a new series today called I Want to Get Away. Anybody ever want to get away? I find myself wanting to get away more and more the hotter it gets. This has been a great summer, has it not? Can you believe that it's August and we had the weather we had this week? Shocking. It's just shocking. It could be better, though. Yeah. It could be better. I told Dad, I just want to go north until it cools off and then just stay there. That's kind of, I hate the heat that bad. But I think for a lot of us, man, I hear this all the time. I just want to leave. You ever just get to the point where you're just ready to throw in the towel, forget it all, forget all your responsibilities, forget all the things that you've been doing, working for, striving for, whatever, that you're just ready to cash in chips and take off. Just, I've got to do something else. Anybody? Yeah. Yeah, I think we get that way. And so I wanted to do this series because today especially, I want to talk to you about getting away. But what I want to talk to you today about is not, there's some of you guys that are like, man, I just need a vacation, okay? I'm not talking to you today. We'll get to taking a vacation later. I'm talking to people who are wanting to get away. You know what I mean? Like, you're so deep into it right now that you just feel this overwhelming sense to hook 'em. That's an East Texas word, to get out, get away. And today I want to talk to you because I feel this way myself a lot of times. I think when we battle with depression, I think it so much starts to consume us that we can't see anything worthwhile in our lives. And when we get to that point, we're like, I just got to escape. I just can't deal with this. And really, man, I've seen this culturally, like this is the way, I can't speak for everybody, but this is what I see from my generation is, man, we're flighty. I mean, like, we're always on the edge. Like, we're a constant flight risk, right? Constant. I know myself, man, my life has always been a constant flight risk. Now, I don't know if that's ADD because they didn't have that when I was a kid. Like, we were just spastic. They didn't call it any technical term. It was just, and there was a cure for ADD when I was a kid. Yeah, my dad had this black belt that was just like, and that cured a lot of that. But I think as we got older, and I'm not. If you're not this way in my generation, I'm not talking about you. But most of us, man, we'll quit on you. I mean, that's just we'll quit on you, and I see it a lot because now all of my friends have kids that are in high school and older, and what I see is that there's a real brokenness in the family environment. There's not a whole lot of stability in the home, whether it is divorce or whether it's just constantly quitting this and starting that and quitting this and starting that, or inconsistencies in everything. And I've seen that in my kids, especially my older daughter. I've seen that the one thing she values more than anything else is stability. And I think that is because of our generation being so unstable. And I don't really have a reason why that is. I just observe that that's the way it is a lot. And so what I find myself daydreaming about, and you may not do this, but I find myself daydreaming about disappearing. I think all the time, now I'm confessing publicly, so I can't do this anymore because I told you what I was going to do. It makes it harder. I watch these shows. You ever seen this show called I Almost Got Away with It? And I'm sitting there going, these people are stupid. I could have got away with it. Because they are ignorant, right? But I think all the time how easy it would be to become somebody else and just start a brand new life. And no one would ever be able to find. This is a big country, is it not? We drove to California before, and between between Fort Worth and San Diego, you can get lost. Like, really lost. I mean, like, no one would ever find you if you didn't want to be found, right? So these thoughts are like, man, I could just start over. Because I'll be honest, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. And I know I'm probably the only one that made a ton of mistakes. But I've made a lot of mistakes. And in those mistakes, and it really is in the heart of the consequence of my mistakes that I want to fly the worst, right? And so I fight these tendencies of flying, taking off. Also, when I struggle with failure. Anybody struggle with failure? Like, I have an idea of the way things should be, and when things don't start turning out that way, and if you've ever been around, I will scrap something on you in a hurry. I don't care how much work or time I've put into it, or you. I mean, like, if it's not working out, if it's not becoming what it should be, scrap it. Just scrap it. And so I deal with not living up to my expectations a lot. Things don't look like I think they should look a lot. So a lot of times I think, man, I'd really like a do-over. It's a clean slate, you know? And it's not like, I'm not like saying, oh man, I'm just going to leave my wife and kids and take off. I'll take them. They can get new identities too. No. They're invited. The thing is, I think a lot of people, whether you admit it or not, probably have these thoughts and these ideas of, I'm in this place that has gotten so bad. I just got to get out. No matter what, I've got to get out. I've got to get away. Life does that to us, doesn't it? We struggle with these things, and when we come to this point, it's like so much easier to run. I mean, in our minds, we have this fantasy that if we could just run, everything would be easier. If I could go live somewhere else, if I could get a different job, if I was married to somebody else, if I had different kids, if I had no kids. But would it? And that's what I keep coming to, because I've talked about this before. What I've come to is I've kind of concluded that in general in my life I seem to be the problem. Now you may not be in yours. You may not be the problem in your life. It's probably somebody else. It's probably me. But I've concluded that in my life, I'm generally the problem. And it's hard to run away from yourself. Has anybody noticed that? Has anybody tried to run away from themselves? Yeah, you can't get away. You can change everything in your life and you keep having the same problems. The consistent factor in all of those problems comes down to you. So, a lot of times I think we have this idea that we just need to get away. We got to run away. We got to leave what it is behind. I was reading this story in the Bible, and if you haven't read it, you've probably seen the movie, because that's what we do in my generation. Like, instead of reading it, we check out the movie. And so you've seen the movie The Ten Commandments? Yeah, every Easter it's on, right? So Charlton Heston, awesome, right? Moses, then NRA, had that whole thing going. So the story takes place, and what happens is, and you'd have to read the whole story to get a picture of what happens. There was this family, and that family became the nation of Israel, and the nation of Israel ends up finding refuge in Egypt because of this son in the family named Joseph. And as that family settles in Egypt, and it stays there through all of this drought and all of this famine that's going on in the world, because God had sent Joseph there to save Israel using Egypt, which is a whole different message, but a very cool one. So, as the nation of Israel takes refuge in Egypt, Egypt starts to notice that this nation is thriving, that it's prospering, that there's something going on with this nation that is going to be bigger. And so what does Egypt naturally want to do? Well, let's take them prisoners and make them our slaves. Because if we can suppress them and keep them captive, then we can own them, control them, and they won't grow bigger than us and take us over. So what happens? The nation of Israel finds itself in slavery and captivity in Egypt for over 400 years. 400 years. 400 years. How many of you guys have a hard time dealing with stuff for like a month? Like, you're like, this is the worst month of my life. This has been the worst week. 400 years. Get some scope. 400 years. That's a long time. And so, over 400 years, there's a generation that comes up that's been born in slavery. Of course, they've never known freedom. They've never known what it was like to be able to do what you want to be able to live where you want to be able to worship how you want to. So what happens is they start to cry out to their God. Now, you'll find this story in Exodus, and this is from Exodus chapter 2, verse 3. And this is what these people are crying out. It said, during those many days, the king of Egypt died. And the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery, and they cried out for help. And their cry for rescue, their cry to get away from slavery came up to God. And God heard their groanings, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, and Abraham was the monarch of this nation. And he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and then with Jacob. And God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Like, he knew. That's amazing. God saw it wasn't like, I forgot about these guys. All of a sudden, they're crying out to me, they're in slavery. It's like, no, he didn't just notice. One of the things you have to understand is that God had prophesied that they would be in this slavery. He had told them in advance that this would happen because of this. And so they knew this was going to happen, but they didn't. It's like everything else. We never expect it to be us, right? So what happened is as they cry out to God, God knew. And so God calls this guy who was an Israelite, but who happened to be raised in the house of Pharaoh. It's a big deal. And if you've seen the movie, it's real cool. It's pretty cool the way it happened. I'm not going to go into it, but you can watch the movie. Or just read it. It's right here in the book. So this guy who's raised in the house of Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, he ends up seeing an Egyptian abusing a slave, and he kills the Egyptian. And then he fears for his life. He's like, man, what have I done? And so he does what? Because when you do bad things, you do what? I want to get away. So Moses goes and he tries to get away. But here's the thing. When you try to get away, God always knows where you're at. So Moses tries to get away. And God finds Moses and says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back to Egypt. And I want you to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And so there's this interaction, and finally, and it's real cool. The movie, man, even they didn't have special effects back then, so there's like a fog machine going. And the angel of death is like a fog machine, which we're like, ooh, fog. We've been to concerts, we've seen that. But this was, it's the best they could do. It was an old movie. So anyway, the angel of death comes, and Pharaoh decides that he's going to let the people go. Now here's what God tells Moses as he's calling Moses to go and do this. The Lord says, and this is in chapter 3, verse 7, and this is another cool thing, the burning bush. Have y'all heard the story of the burning bush? Awesome. God speaks out of a burning bush that's burning but doesn't burn up. Very cool. And he says this, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry because they're taskmasters, and I know their sufferings. And I have come down to deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians. God came to help them get away. But listen to this, and you may not have seen this before. I came to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Pezerites, Havites, Jebusites, all kinds of ites. This was good. This was a good thing. But I want you to get this. God's plan wasn't, he heard their cries, he knew what they wanted, but his plan wasn't for them to get away as much as it was where he wanted to take them. How many times in our life do we just want to get away? We don't want to go to, we want to get away from. I think this is something that if we understand, if we start to register, if it starts to sink in, we'll start to look at God different. We'll start to look at where we're at in this life different. I think we'll start to understand things and see things a lot different. I want to get away. I just got to escape. But sometimes when your only vision is to get away, you'll end up like this, and this is in chapter 14, on down as the story goes, chapter 14 in verse 11. Now these people have been brought out of slavery, right? Yeah, they've been delivered. You would say that they got what they wanted, right? God, we just want to get away. And we can feel that, right? We do that in our lives. I just want to get away. And maybe you've done this and you just want to get away. But here's what happens when they got away. They find themselves by the Red Sea. And in verse 11 of chapter 14 it says this. They said to Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us bringing us out of Egypt? I thought that's what we wanted. What have you done, God? What have you done to us? You brought us out of Egypt. Is this not what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Is this not what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. No, that wasn't what you said. I mean, it wasn't even a few pages. 4 or 5 pages. 4 or 5 pages ago, they were crying out, God, get us out of here. 5 pages later, why did you bring us out of here? Didn't we say we wanted to stay in Egypt? I found out in my life that a lot of times when I'm running away from, I find myself in worse situations than I was actually in. And my perspective changed because we look back and go, I really didn't have it that bad then. I wish I could go back there. How many of you ever done that? Have you ever changed jobs going, I can't take it anymore. I've got to get out of this place. I've got to get out of this place. You switch jobs, you're like, oh my God, I wish I had my old job back. Did we do that? I don't know why I quit that job. I don't know why I'm here in this place. God, I just wanted out of my old job. I didn't want out of my old job. I wanted out of my old job. I didn't want out of it. And God's like, man, I don't even know if you know what you want. There was 2 people, though. See, there was Moses, and then there was his disciple. And his disciple from the time he was young, his name was Joshua. Now, Joshua was a disciple of Moses. And Moses wasn't getting away from Egypt. Moses was going to the promised land. And this disciple of his, Joshua, he got it. He walked with Moses and he got it and he understood it. Joshua's mission in life was to go to the promised land. He wanted to go enter into this land of the promise, the land that God had given them. He was driven by the idea of going to somewhere. And the rest of that nation, and you're talking about over 1 million people, just wanted to get away. And do you know what happened to that 1 million people? Every single person who had left Egypt died in the desert before they went into the promised land, except for the ones who were going to the promised land. All the ones who were getting away died in the desert. Now here's what I don't want for us. I don't want you to die in the desert. I don't want you to die in the desert. I want us to change our perspective and change our scopes. Now, you may be in a place of suffering, a circumstance that's unbearable. Your life may be caving in on you. It may be bad. But what I want you to do is not look at what you need to get away from, but what you need to get to. Celia's been saying this to me for a week now. She won't shut up. She's been saying, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. She says that all the time. She says it over and over and over, like a broken record. You guys don't even know what a record is. You guys know what a record is. Yeah. I said something the other day. Hey, you guys who grew up in the 80s, yeah, what about these radios? What did you call these radios that you carried around? Jam box, right? I said jam box to Brandis the other day, and she said, what? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like today, kids are walking around with an iPod and little things in their ears. Back in the day, you had it up here on your shoulder, boom, chicka, boom, right? The jam box. Anyway, that has nothing to do with anything. It's crazy. Our kids don't know what a jam box is. Tell Ella, go get the jam box. Hey, got an iPod? Don't make any noise. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. See, the thing we want to leave The thing we want to get away from, we're trying to get away from it because it's our prison, right? It has us held captive. And our scope is that it's stealing the possibilities of our life. And we want to escape this thing that, hey, whether we caused it ourselves or whether something else caused it, whether Mother Nature caused it, whether someone in our lives, in our past, no matter what caused it, it doesn't change the fact that we want to get away from it. Because we feel, the only reason we'd want to get away is we feel that it's taking our lives from us. If I could just start over without all these mistakes, then I could have real life. And we find ourselves in the desert going, I don't know why you brought me out here. I didn't ask to come out here. I didn't ask to get away. We forget. We forget. See, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. And it's freedom that we are wanting. But you got to get this, man. You'll never get freedom getting away from. Ever. Freedom only comes in getting to. You guys who are here and you're running from, you feel like your life's over, you maybe have anger or hate or bitterness or depression. Maybe you're addicted. And you're like, I've got to get away from this depression. I've got to get away from this anger, this bitterness. I've got to get away from this addiction. You will die in the desert if you try to get away from the addiction. You're going to die in the desert if you try to get away from the anger. If you'll die in the desert if you try to get away from the person who hurt you, who wronged you. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. We've got to figure out how to get to something and what to get to. In Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, it says this, Jesus talking, and as Jesus is talking, he's talking, and he comes to this, he says this thing that like made way more sense to those people standing there than it does to us. Because you got to remember, these Jews, these Hebrew people had been living in a different kind of slavery. They had been taken by the Roman Empire. So they were controlled by the government, they were controlled by the Romans. But among their own people, they were controlled by these rabbis who put these, what were called yokes, these teachings, these heavy burdens on them, these rules that they couldn't possibly live up to. And here's what I found about religious people is they'll put stuff on you that they can do. Like if I don't struggle with this, then I'm going to put that rule on you because frankly it makes me feel more righteous. And that's what was going on. So these rabbis, and what a rabbi's teaching was called his yoke. Okay? This is a rabbi's yoke was laid out. And these yokes were heavy and they were hard and they were a burden for the people. But all of a sudden this other rabbi comes and he says this in verse 28. He says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden or are carrying burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." That's key. If you got your Bible and you're reading that, circle that. And learn from me. For I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. See, the thing we're trying to get away from that's killing us, that has us imprisoned, the thing we've got to get to overcome that, to break free from that, the thing we've got to get to It's the Spirit of the Lord. It's Jesus. So people are like, well, see, Todd, that doesn't help me because I got saved. And I still want to get away. I'm not talking about getting saved. I'm talking about coming to Jesus. It's different, you know. See, the key is something that I've never seen. How many of you guys have been in church and heard these verses before? There was this song, Come Unto Me. Remember that one? Hymns. Terrible. Terrible. That's opinion, not fact. Maybe fact. I don't know. Come to me, all you labor and are heavy laden. I heard a million messages of this on my whole life. I've read this verse thousands of times, but this week I saw this for the first time because I was thinking, how do you come to Jesus and get relieved from this yoke, this burden? Learn from me. That's it. It's the key. And we've missed it. It's not magic. Jesus says, I will teach you everything you need to know about how to live real life in freedom. And the people he was talking to were in bondage by Rome and would stay that way even after he died. He gave freedom to people who were in prison. He gave life to dead people. How can a dead person be alive? How can people who are in bondage be free? Because Jesus' teachings say it doesn't have anything to do with your circumstance. Here's how to live. If you really want to live, I'm going to show you how, I'm going to tell you how. And he starts to teach. And everything he taught can be found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they're not rules. This isn't an Old Testament, this isn't a New Testament law that was given. Jesus says, for those of you guys who want to live, who want to be set free, who are tired of running from but want to run to, here's what you want to run to. My teachings. My teachings. You say, well, I've never read the Bible. I've never read the Bible. How in the world will you know how to live? I can't teach you 5 verses a week. Is that all the life you want? Is that all you want to know about life? What, the rest of the time you're just going out there and make the best decision you can possibly make? That's what happens in the desert and you die there. You die there. See, reason says if you want to quit something, you need to run from it. You need to put it behind you. You need to push it away. You need to go and you need to work on your addiction. Jesus says if you want a new life, you don't have to run from it. You need to run to it. God's principles have always been not to run away, but to run to. Come to me. You want to know how to live free? You want to really get away from what's going on in your life? Teachings of Jesus. And all of you guys are like so disappointed right now. Like, I thought it'd be something cooler. Why would God make it hard? He laid it out right there in front of you. He said, here's everything you need to know. I want to make it as easy as possible. Do you want rest for your soul? Because that's where, physically we got things going on in our world and our lives, right? But the turmoil's in our souls, isn't it? You want rest for your soul? You want freedom for your soul? The teachings of Jesus. He teaches us how to live. He says things like, forgiveness is better than unforgiveness. He says things like, love is better than anger. Acceptance is better than condemnation. Humility is better than pride. These are the teachings of Jesus. If you want to find life, if you're tired of living in freedom, in bondage, and you want to find freedom, come to Jesus. Embrace the teachings of Jesus. Set them as your promised land. Jesus teaches over and over and over and over that his teachings are the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven, the symbolic kingdom of heaven was the promised land in the Old Testament. Egypt was the world. Moses was the deliverer, the Messiah. In the New Testament, we have the world, we have Jesus, the Savior, and we have the kingdom of heaven. You don't want to die in the desert. Quit running from, quit getting away from, and get away to. Get away to. Make it more about the destination. You want to really enjoy a vacation? Make it about the destination, not about what you're trying to leave behind. Because if you're trying to leave it behind, you're going to be depressed when you're going to. Because once you get there, you realize, dang it, I got to go back. Anybody ever had that happen on vacation? It's like you have a vacation to get away from. You're like, and all of a sudden your promised land becomes depression. We've got to learn to get away too. Does that make sense? All right, let me pray for it.